All right. So we've officially kicked off a new week looking at Bitcoin on the weekly chart. For today's video, I'm going to be looking at a top down analysis of the crypto market as a whole, starting with Bitcoin, looking at Bitcoin dominance. I want to look at Ethereum, Litecoin, and maybe Ripple as well. Some of the bigger market cap altcoins that are starting to, you know, pop off and get a little bit hyped in this market cycle as Bitcoin nears the end of its bullish market cycle. So as expected, we're getting a nice little altcoin season, which has typically started to develop towards the end of a Bitcoin market cycle. So let's jump right into it. Pretty much, not a whole lot of information, in the weekly close that we got on Sunday. We are pushing up, guys. This is the critical point I want to point out on Bitcoin before we move on. It's still this 141 extension. Yeah, we know that this is how we can keep track of where we are as we push into price discovery on our Fibonacci's. We've got a one anchored up here at the old top at 60K, and we've anchored the zero down here at 15 or 16K at that bottom. We saw these fib levels play out as we pushed up into previous resistance levels, came back down and pushed up, hit this 127, sold us off pretty drastically. We got support off of these weekly 20 shorter term moving averages. We got the 20 and the 50 right up here. So we can see we pushed up, and now we're pushing up into that 141. So let's see what's going on here on the daily. So here we are at Bitcoin's daily chart. Again, really solid 127 extension level action way back here. And we've also got the volume profile just giving us another, more reassurance that this level was a key level for traders. You can see a lot of volume traded right at this 127 extension. So that is currently the point of control. And we're just taking the volume from this point here, October 15th of 2024, when this initially pushed up. So that's the most relevant sort of volume profile data that we have. And again, look at this, what's happening up here, guys. As we pushed up into this 141 extension, we're getting initial resistance, and we're seeing a little tiny bar on the volume profile starting to develop at this 141. All right, and we can zoom in on this data and we can see what kind of action we're getting in here. Usually you can see, might be too small, but you can see the percentage of buyers and sellers at this level. You can see it's mostly buyers, a little bit bigger of a bar here on the volume profile. But again, this is really just to show us the action that we're getting at this 141. We had a big bar here at the 127, and now here we're getting a little bit of a bar here at the 141. Let's drill in a little further on the 4 hour, see what we're expecting on this weekly. So today is Monday, so we've got a good amount of time on this 4 hour. I think we're seeing pretty solid signs of resistance. We did come down into the moving average, the 100-period moving average on the 4 hour chart, and popped us up. But I think this is eventually going to start to um, kind of flounder out a little bit here. I think we're going to hit off this 141, and we might want to come back down to this 127, which is around 100K. That also is a pretty massive psychology level, as you know, the 100K mark. So that's in the back of my mind as well. But I do think that there is still room to push up on this Bitcoin weekly chart as we go into Q3 and move into Q4 as well. Ultimately, I think this 161 is going to be the best exit price for your dollar cost average strategy. But yeah, really interesting to see this 141 coming into play. Not a huge drastic response like we saw of this 127 where we sold off into 75K yet. So we do have a lot of support coming in. We've got momentum with us still. But it's very interesting to see that. And as Bitcoin kind of chops sideways here at these higher levels, it gives the altcoins now a chance to really catch up. And we do see some of these ETHBTC charts starting to pop off. So let me show you guys what I'm looking at here now that we've got Bitcoin out of the way. We'll jump into the Bitcoin dominance chart so you can see it had a huge sell-off now as we saw Ripple take a huge pumping up to $3.50. Litecoin pumped to 120. So it's above that 100K mark for Litecoin, and Ethereum as well pumping above the 3,500 mark. So one thing I want to point out on this Bitcoin dominance chart is just the beautiful run up that we've had since 2023, where Bitcoin has just absorbed a huge percentage of the market cap, now hovering at around 60%. So we drew a fib now, guys, from the top here. This would have been peak altcoin season back in January of 2021. And then since then, we had a huge sell off. Bitcoin sold off, altcoins sold off even harder. And, altcoins were looking for refuge in Bitcoin as the Bitcoin dominance started to rally back up. So this was peak altcoin season when Bitcoin dominance was at about 40%. And since then, it's gained all the way up. So we've got a Fibonacci now, guys, from the top there when Bitcoin dominance was the highest at 73%, down into the low here at 40%. And we watched this retracement. We came up, we hit the 50, we hit the 38.2, right? 61.8, back down to the 50, and then up into the 78.6. So the 78.6 is really, really showing a massive sign of as resistance. We can see this action all happening right here. So really, really solid to see that pulling off the 78.6, getting a little bit of an altcoin season back here for all the degenerate gamblers out there who love to try to spot the next, next big thing. So I do think, this has some potential to come down a little further into probably the 58% mark. I'd say that's a good spot for this to probably get a little bit of support. We saw, some support at that level over here as we pumped up higher. So I do think that this will come down. I think even 55% could come into play. That's a big psychology level. Bitcoin, I think, as long as it holds like 50, above 50% of the market cap, I think that's pretty normal. So up here, I think is a little bit overbought for Bitcoin relative to altcoins. Anytime you get into the 50% level, I think is a very good time to move your altcoins back into Bitcoin. So we have one solid week, guys. This is just a week in. We're basically a week into what you would call alt season, but you got to be careful because sometimes you can get faked out. As we saw back here, we saw, a pretty big sell off on this chart, meaning capital flowing out of Bitcoin into altcoins and the dominance coming down. But since then, we've rallied and Bitcoin has been still absorbing most of the, new capital coming into the crypto market. So I'll be watching this carefully. But, if you did spot this and you say, you know what, I think we got a little bit of an altcoin season. I want Bitcoin dominance to come down. I want to buy altcoins to outperform Bitcoin to ultimately, give you more Bitcoin down the road. So let's jump into my favorite altcoins. I mean, I'm an OG in this market. I've been, invested in Bitcoin since 2017, since we first broke through the $1,000 mark. And I have also been an advocate of Litecoin, Ethereum, Ripple. I've started to concentrate more into Bitcoin over the past couple of years, as the entire market has as well, as we watched this dominance chart start to rally. And altcoins were just bleeding out. It was hard to find a bottom. So we've been holding on to Bitcoin as a very dominant portfolio holding. And I think now, you could take a stab. We have, I think, 3 to 6 months of, bullish crypto market left. So it makes sense towards the end of this cycle to try to juice it as much as you can and allocate a little bit to, some of the long shots. So let's start off with Ethereum. Ethereum had a really nice push, extremely, overbought now on the weekly and on some of the higher time frames. But let's jump into Ethereum. Let's see how it's looking versus the USD as well as versus Bitcoin. So Ethereum, guys, is a really, really beautiful chart as well in terms of Fibonacci's and just overall technical analysis. You can see we've got a fib from the top of this bull market here with the top at around 5K, and we've anchored it to the bottom where we bottomed out around $1,000 for Ethereum. And you can see since then we've chopped along these, Fibonacci levels. We've been just chopping along. We broke out here in October 23rd of 2023 and pushed higher. So we hit this previous all-time high resistance and we've sold off quite drastically. So it's been quite the roller coaster ride here for Ethereum holders. You can see we pumped, we dropped from 4,000 back down into 1,500. So that was like a 60% sell off right here. And then since then, we've just bounced back up, chopped around that 61.8 fib, and now we're pushing up higher into this resistance again. So you can see if I take the fib off now, I've also got some pattern recognition on the screen. I think we're building a bit of a, bullish flag, pennant and flagpole, or whatever you want to call it, where you have this pattern where you push up and then you build a bit of a flagpole or a pennant, whatever you want to call it. And then the targets for this type of pattern would be taking this distance here on the flagpole, and you can say once we break out to the upside, we can have a bit of a target here like that. Now, this is just visually, something to anticipate once we can break out of the structure. But ultimately, I would be more relying on the Fibonacci's again. So taking a fib from the top here to the bottom here. And we can say, just like we did with Bitcoin, look at that 141 extension. So currently, Bitcoin is at this 141 extension when I've got this target for Ethereum. So that's for Ethereum coming in around $10,000, right? Which I think makes a lot of sense for Ethereum to come into the 10K mark. A very, very big milestone for Ethereum. And the one thing I wanted to point out was if right, if this is a big enough move to push ETH up into all-time highs, we can map this out because right now we're still battling this previous all-time high that we saw from 2021. We have not broken this level since 2021, and we have to confirm that this makes sense versus the Bitcoin chart as well. So what I'd like to do is look at ETHBTC, and I also like to look at ETH versus Litecoin. So let's just see if we can. First of all, let's pull our little tool here for the price range on the screen, and we can see just from here, guys, if we broke out to new all-time highs and we pushed up to this 127 and maybe this 141 extension, that's 175% return from here. Okay, and that would happen pretty rapidly, over the next 3 to 6 months. I think for Ethereum it would be a pretty crazy move, but you've seen in the past how Ethereum can push up very, very enthusiastically and just kind of slide up on this 90-degree angle like nothing you've ever seen before. All right. So we're watching Ethereum. It's, there could be some potential alpha here versus Bitcoin. Let's see what we're working with versus this ETH BTC chart, because this is ultimately my gauge for whether or not it's wise to trade your Bitcoin for Ethereum, because you can see if you've done that since March of 2023, you've been absolutely obliterated, right? Bitcoin has outperformed Ethereum, um, by I think double at least. You can see selling off here. The essentially ETH bear market versus Bitcoin started right here, uh, October of 2023, and it's just been relentless downtrend, right? So finally, we've got a lot of bullish structure. You can see even on the weekly. I mean, that is a solid move. It's very much a bottom formation in terms of structure. We can take a trend line here like this, guys. So we'll take a trend line out here. There's all kinds of trend lines, down trend lines on this chart now that it's just been in this bear market for so long. So there's a downward trend line here that we might want to hit. You can see the moving averages as well are going to be big resistance for this chart, but you have to take a fib. It's too obvious, right? From this point here on that top versus the ETH BTC chart down to this bottom. And you can see as we started to come down, retrace, we already got indication that the 61.8 was in play, bounced up to the 78.6, right? Back down to the 50, back up to the 61.8. So we knew these fibs were going to be watched. And, these are the spots where traders are going to step in. They could not hold on to this ETH BTC chart right here at the 50%. So we sold off even further down into this 23.6. So this is the action that we're currently seeing right here. We slipped below the 23.6, got extremely exaggerated, oversold, popped up to the 23.6. We had some good price action here for like a week or two. How many weeks here? We got like 4 or 5 weeks. And then since then, we've been able to break up above this very, very steep trend line on the weekly, and we popped up. So very bullish weekly chart here for ETHBTC. It's very much buying a bottoming pattern, and I'll show you what I mean by that as we drill into the daily time frame. So here's exactly how you can see it clearly. This action that we got on the 23.6, really battling these moving averages. This is the 200 period moving average on the daily, coming in here. So the market slipped right up into that moving average, tried to hold it down as resistance and continue the bear market. We finally got above these moving averages, and that's kind of what I guess ignited this ETH BTC bull market. So really nice to see ETH, showing some signs of life, outperforming Bitcoin, giving you opportunity to perhaps accumulate more Bitcoin if you if that's your strategy. Right? This is a 34% move, ETHBTC. So technically, if you time this right, you could have basically just earned 34% more Bitcoin, right? And now we need to question, is this move just beginning, or have we already missed the train here on the ETHBTC chart? I think we still have some more upside. I think alt season is probably going to kick off in Q3 and then really heat up towards the end of Q4. That's what we've seen in the past. We've seen very, very bullish, you know, October, November, December historically at the end of the Bitcoin bull market cycle. That is when the altcoins really just pop off and they just try to squeeze whatever returns they can, because the ensuing bear market is going to be relentless as well, which I'm anticipating in 26. So we have to get these altcoin, price charts up. We have to get them into new all-time highs. Otherwise, in 2026, we'll just see relentless downtrend again, and the chart will be ruined. So we are seeing some signs of life here from Ethereum. Really, really nice to see. Key levels to watch. Again, this 0.36 level. So I guess you would call it 36 Satoshis or 0.36 Satoshis. That's a key level. So technically this could pump a little bit higher. I would very much caution against buying in on an ETH momentum trade right now. There's about 16%, I'd say, higher up into this 50%, and then if we get all the way to the 618, which is around zero point 0.5 satoshis, another very, very significant level, that could be another 40% higher from here. All right, I do think that would ultimately this is going to want to roll over, and once the bear market starts in crypto, I think ETH is going to sell off into Bitcoin, and we're going to continue. We're going to rally up, right? And then taking profits Ethereum into Bitcoin and then selling back off into this level. I think, the 0.033 level is a key level as well for this ETHBTC chart, but a very, very nice sort of pattern here. This is what we like to see on a bottoming pattern. We see an initial pump, a pullback into the 38.2, and then a push up into extension levels, usually the 161 or the 2.618, which we can see here. Let's see. So just a little bit higher than the 2.618, but pretty damn close. And then we'll come back down and create some sort of cipher pattern or some sort of bat or whatever you want to call these. I'd call them all cipher patterns. They use Fibonacci's to spot bottoms. But essentially what you want to see is a pump, a pullback into 38.2, and then a pump into extension levels. That's what I like to look for. And then you can, once this pulls back, you can buy the dip. All right, so key level right there, that 38.2. We've definitely, I think, made a very strong statement here on this ETHBTC chart. We've crossed over these daily moving averages. I mean, look at this. Since July of 2024, this has just run even further. Actually, we tried to dabble with these moving average crosses way back here, couldn't do it, sent us down, right? And then since then, these moving averages have just been relentlessly just pressuring this price down. We got up to the big one here, the 200, the big red moving average. We dabbled with it, and then boom, we decided to push up above it. So now these moving averages should come in as support. I'd be watching these very closely. Any opportunity we get to pull back here, I think would be wise to shift a little bit of your Bitcoin holdings perhaps into Ethereum. Not financial advice, but that is something that I would watch for as I'm shifting my allocation between Bitcoin and some of the key altcoins here. All right, and then that is the ETHBTC chart. I'm going to do a separate video for Litecoin because we have a lot of interesting stuff going on there as well. So that's going to do it for this video. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.